Welcome one and all to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you had an amazing weekend. You had an amazing Monday, and you had an amazing time seeing the Braves get a victory against what should be a playoff team, one of the better pitchers in the National League on the mound. The Braves countered with Bryce Elder, who's been absolutely magnificent as of late, and the Braves got a victory. And of course, with where we are in the time of the season, none of that matters with the news that was dropped today. Kidding aside, we have an action-packed episode of the Hammer Territory Podcast with you. And as always, the best podcast partner that anyone can think of for myself, Stephen Tolbert is here as always. Stephen, good getting to see you, sir. Hope all has been well on your end. You actually got to see your team win a college football game this weekend. Go ahead, Stephen.
Wow. That's how we're starting. Okay. All right. It's going to be that kind of show. What's up, buddy? Who needs enemies when you got friends like these? Yeah, we actually got to see a win for the Braves tonight. I'm not talking about my college football team. We got to see a win tonight. Bryce Elder pitched well. We're going to get into all that, but unfortunately, the news of the day kind of stole the headlines, and you could probably tell if you're listening to this or watching this by the headlines that we had some pretty massive, unexpected kind of bombshell news come out about 1 or 2 p.m., something like that. And it has big effects on the rest of the season, potentially on next season, potentially on the off season. So there's a lot to get into tonight.
Absolutely. And we'll jump right into it. Of course, can't thank you enough for tuning in, watching, listening, however you enjoy the Hammer Territory Podcast. We cannot thank you enough for all the support for the Foul Territory family of podcasts. And what Stephen is alluding to is that earlier this afternoon, it was announced by the Braves, who had made multiple roster moves, which we'll get into a bit later on the show, the specifics of the roster moves that they made. But the big news of the day concerns Shawn Murphy and the fact that Shawn Murphy will be out for the rest of the year and likely will be rehabbing for much of the offseason due to a tear in his hip. Now, I can't remember if it was the labrum or something along those lines, but it's a significant injury that is actually going to require surgery later this week. That in of itself is a significant development. That is a significant news nugget in and of itself. But adding to that is how this all came about, Stephen. The fact that, Shawn Murphy basically has been dealing with this for 3 years. He's dealt with it. He's gone through pain management. He's dealt with other injuries while dealing with this. And then it just got to the point, evidently over the weekend, where it just became, the word used was unbearable. But the fact is that this has been going on for 3 years, and the organization didn't find out about it till Sunday. That in of itself, I think it's fair to raise questions about that. So let's get into it. Stephen, what were your initial reactions, and what questions did you formulate and come back with answers on? Just what were your initial thoughts when you heard all the details of this pretty significant development when it comes to Shawn Murphy?
Yeah. I mean, it was a bombshell, of course. He's got I think it's called a labral tear in his hip. He is going to have the surgery. There's different treatments. If you do the surgery, it ends up being a 4 to 6 month kind of recovery time. And obviously 6 months is where you get into spring training. So, when the Braves announced it today, they announced that he's going to be ready for spring training. That felt a little optimistic to me. I'm not sure I would write that in pen just yet. I've actually talked to some people in the last few hours since this all came out that either have had this surgery or have family that have had this surgery. And they've all said the same thing. This is a major, major surgery, and it takes a long time to come back from. And so I'm not sure I would just go ahead and say full on that Shawn Murphy is going to be 100% ready to go for spring training. I'm not sure that's true. But yeah, it was shocking. The news dropped, and then immediately after the news dropped, we found out that he's been dealing with this for 3 years. He told the team about it this week, but he's been dealing with it off and on for 3 years, which is crazy to me. I don't understand this culture of like trying to play hurt. It started with Freddie Freeman. It didn't start with Freddie Freeman, but kind of Freddie Freeman was the most famous case in recent history with the Braves, where like, you got to be out there every day, and you can't miss time, and you got to ignore injuries. And even if you're not, able to play to your best, you should still be out there. And I'm not a big fan of that mindset, to be honest. I think it ends up doing more hurt than good. In Shawn's case, I think it's certainly done more hurt than good, especially, listen, after 2023, you know, he had that amazing season. He's got a fully guaranteed contract. Like, he's not playing for more money. Like, just be honest with the team that you're hurt. And we're talking about a hip. I mean, we're talking about imagine trying to hit, I mean, think about how your hips fire when you're trying to swing a baseball bat or a golf club or anything athletic. Now imagine trying to hit major league pitching with a torn hip. I mean, I just don't understand why. I mean, I do understand they're highly competitive people. They want to be out there, but like, you know, this stuff kind of drives me crazy a little bit. And I disagree with the way Shawn handled it. He should have been up front from the beginning. I understand it's somewhat of a pain tolerance thing, and the pain got to the point where he just couldn't bear it anymore. But by that point, you should have said something a long time ago. Long time ago. So yeah, it was a shock. It's a shock how long he's been dealing with it. And again, with the timetable, I know they said he's going to be ready for spring training. I'm not sure I would go that far just yet.
And let's also look at it from the perspective of, this is now a trend with Shawn Murphy. You talk about, trying to hit with a pretty significant hip injury, trying to catch as well. Having an injured hip while trying to catch, that has got to be painful also. So the first thing I want to say is I agree with you, is that at some point along the line, this shouldn't have gone on 3 years without there being more knowledge known about what was happening, especially last year. I know the Braves really didn't have, a secondary option besides Travis d'Arnaud to come in and pair with him, but Shawn Murphy has to say something, and I don't necessarily, I can't speak to how big of a culture still remains of trying to play through injuries and all that. But I will say that this organization now has a track record this season alone of questionable developments leading to significant injury concerns. There was the coaching staff not being able to recognize what was going on with AJ Smith-Shawver. It took Spencer Strider saying something. Of course, the Acuna, scenario in which he played, with what he felt was a hurt Achilles, and now this Shawn Murphy development. I'm not saying as if the organization is doing something completely wrong, but there just seems to be a lack of effective level awareness of when a player is playing hurt, and that has got to improve, especially with how much injuries have impacted this team over the past couple of years. That's the first thought that I want to hit on. The second thought now is the ripple effect that this has on the offseason, because now this pretty much put in place. I know that you could probably still look to trade Shawn Murphy if you found the right deal. But teams aren't going to sit there and want to pay a probably a good enough price for you to consider trading Shawn Murphy, with him now coming off 2 years of significant injuries and the fact that he has struggled at the plate outside of July of this year over the past 2 years. See, that's the other thing that stands out about this, is that now we're going to, in 2024, 2025, and likely 2026, and each of those, the past 3 years, Shawn Murphy will have started the season on the IL. I imagine that's how he's going to start 2026. So not only does this impact potentially your offseason plans, because now Shawn Murphy doesn't become a trade asset, he likely is going to be with the team, you also are probably going to have to figure out your catching position behind Drake Baldwin to start next year. So in multiple ways, it has a significant impact, an unexpected impact on next year's plans.
Yeah, it's just uncertainty. And for such a large part of the season, one of the only things the Braves had going for them was like their catcher position was one of the best in baseball. I mean, there was a big chunk of the early part of the season, really probably the first 3 or 4 months, where Baldwin and Murphy were arguably the best catching tandem in baseball. And that's one of the few things the Braves could kind of count on. And now you go into the offseason and you already have uncertainty at so many other places, especially the rotation, where it's probably the most significant level of uncertainty and most impactful in terms of its, how it can change an entire season. You have uncertainty in the bullpen. You still have uncertainty with your offense, and now you've got, what was originally one of your better, positional setups with Baldwin and Murphy. Now that's uncertain because you don't know what Murph's going to do next year. You don't know how long he's going to be. You don't know how his rehab's going to go. if you had any inclination of trading him in the offseason, that's pretty much out the window. I mean, the Braves still owe Murphy, I think, $50 million, $50 million, something like that. I think he's got 3 years at $15 million a year. And then I think he's got a buyout. It's a chunk of money. So a team's not just going to gladly trade for that contract right now, not knowing, A, how long Murphy's going to be hurt, and B, what he's going to look like on the other side of it. So yeah, it is more uncertainty. And it's just it's another thing that this team kind of has to weather. And this offseason is going to be fascinating, Shawn. I mean, this offseason is just going to be so damn fast. I mean, they've got so much uncertainty at players with players that are locked into contracts. I genuinely don't know what they're going to, I don't know if they can afford to just go into next season with all of these guys under contract and just hope that the majority of them work out next year. That just seems like a incredibly low probability thing to happen. So, man, what a fascinating offseason the Braves are in store for.
Yeah, because I mean, we've already seen it not work out, right? It has not worked out over the past 2 years. And we're now really getting into the point of where these contracts now are getting more expensive, raises to players like Spencer Strider and others as well. And don't get me wrong. If it does work out, you've got a World Series contender on your hands. Let's make that clear. The outcome of this in a positive aspects, which still is a very it is a very relevant outcome. It's a very realistic outcome. You could still have a World Series contender on your hands. But I do agree with you, Stephen. We now have more uncertainty than we had anticipated going into this offseason, on top of the fact that we've had 2 straight seasons where it's not worked out anywhere close to where we had hoped. One other final thing that I do want to speak to, again, talking about how this development could impact the rest of this season as well as the offseason. One big thing that this does do is it's going to allow for Drake Baldwin to really take over that catcher spot and basically play every day. But the thing that I will say is this, is that when we talk about the fact that this team is going to probably have both Murphy as well as Baldwin next year, I'm not to the point. I haven't seen enough where I clearly am for the catcher DH approach, where 1 DHs, 1 catches going into next season. So when I talk about how this impacts the offseason, not only are you potentially going to have to find added catcher depth to start the season, but you also potentially are going to, if it's not Marcell Ozuna, find another bat to take on that DH role, or potentially fill another position and keep that DH role as an open door to where maybe Ronald or Jurickson or one of the 2 catchers DHs. That's what we mean when we say it's just adding more questions to an offseason that already had plenty of them to deal with.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the catching position is directly tied to the DH position, and the DH position is directly tied to what you do with Ronald and what you do with Profar and which free agents you go after. And so, yeah. And I don't know, I don't know how interested they've ever been in the whole one guy catches, the other guy is the DH scenario anyways. That's just stuff we speculated back when both catchers were hitting really well. It's kind of been a long time since both catchers hit really well, though, to be honest. So I don't know if that was ever a realistic option for them anyways. They might have always set out to go get a DH or go get an outfielder and let Ronald and Profar and, new outfielder and the catchers and let them all rotate DH, which is, without knowing specific names, is probably the way I would lean. But yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. The catching position impacts all of that because obviously you have Baldwin and Murphy, and now you're probably almost certainly going to have Murphy next year. So, if they were planning on that, they probably have to adjust those plans. So it is just one more thing to account for. And Alex, I mean, they're adding up for Alex, the number of things he has to account for this winter. And, the number of things that are going to have to go well for the Braves in spring and summer next year. So this thing doesn't go off the rails again like it has in 2025.
The thing I'll end with as far as this scenario goes, and you're right about the idea of perhaps them going to get another outfielder and then them rotating out of the DH spot. The reported interest in Byron Buxton is an example of that, though
Yeah.
I'm not sure how, Ha-Seong Kim and his salary being around next year impacts that. Again, just more questions. We got plenty of time to discuss that. But I do want to end with this note. As many questions potentially are added to the offseason from this development, there's, again, one outcome that is very much on the table to where a lot of these questions could become less significant. And that is Shawn Murphy becoming a healthy Shawn Murphy once again and showing at times what he did in the first half of 2023 and also about 6 weeks ago. That Shawn Murphy still could really show up next year for the Braves, and that can make him an asset once again. But getting to that point, the journey to that destination is once again going to be a rocky one. And I know this organization is tired of such journeys. But that was just one part of the news that was revealed today. We'll have plenty more to discuss in a moment after a word from our partners.
Football is back, and so is your shot at big wins. With DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, your game day instincts score you real money fast. Here's the play. Just pick more or less on 2 or more stats from breakout rookies to elite QBs and unlock the upside every snap brings. The better your calls, the bigger your payout. And here's a kickoff bonus. New DraftKings customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. This season, play your player instincts. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL. Play just $5, get $50 in Pick 6 bonus picks, make the call, ride the upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So, Stephen, the other news of the day, we actually talked about it on the last edition of the Hammer Territory podcast that you and I did. We discussed how another, maybe not so much talked about storyline is how is this coaching staff going to evolve as the offseason goes on? If Brian Snitker were to step aside, what does that mean for the rest of his coaching staff, so on and so forth? And by the way, all this news is coming from the fact that Alex Anthopoulos, he actually had a Q&A. He spoke with the media today, so that's why we have multiple significant storylines to discuss. But the thought with Brian Snitker, the conversation was around, well, has there been any thought? Has there been any updates on his future with the squad? And we didn't really get like a definitive answer, but Stephen, it certainly seemed like the way that Alex was talking, any anticipation that's been there that Snitker could, potentially retire and, move on to another role with the Braves, that very much seems to be like a realistic possibility. That's kind of what Alex Anthopoulos spoke to, how he'll always have a place with the Braves. Any decision about when he wants to make a decision, whether it come early, come later on the offseason, that's up to him. One thing I do think is that the Braves will want to get a definitive answer as early in the offseason as possible. But I came away from Alex's comments about Brian Snitker being the fact that I think this organization is preparing for a change at the manager spot this offseason.
Yeah, he did not say it outright. He gave a pretty wishy-washy answer, which is what Alex does. But anytime you start hearing, a front office guy talking about a manager like retrospectively, like he's always going to be a part of the organization and he's always got a place here. Anytime you start hearing stuff like that about a guy who's still on the job, he's not going to be on the job for long. Like you don't talk about that. You don't talk like that about a guy who just signed a 3-year contract extension. You talk about that's something you talk about when the guy's in the last month of his coaching career, most likely. And yeah, the way I see it playing out is I think somewhere around the last day of the season, maybe the last day of the season, Snit will announce that he's retiring. There is not a single person in baseball, not a single person that we've talked to in front of the camera, behind the camera, on the record, off the record, not a single person we've talked to that thinks Brian Snitker is going to manage next year. And listen, if the Braves wanted to truly get rid of this, these questions, they could announce that he's signing a contract extension at any point and could have done that at any point in the last year, 2 years, 3 years, and they haven't done that. I don't know if they haven't put in a contract extension in front of Snit because they don't have any interest, or they have put one in front of him and he hasn't taken it because he doesn't have any interest, or a combination of both. Whatever it is, the tea leaves point to one very clear direction, and that is enjoy. If you are somebody who loves Brian Snitker, enjoys his managing, enjoys watching him being the manager of the Braves, I suggest you pay attention strongly over the next 2.5, 3 weeks, because it is almost certainly coming to an end once we get to October, and certainly once we get into 2026.
And it's time, right? Like it's
Yes.
clearly time.
Yes.
Brian Snitker, he won his 800th victory with the Braves tonight. And by all means, I want to make this clear that two separate truths can certainly exist in the same time in most cases, and that is the case with Brian Snitker. On one hand, this is the second best Braves manager in franchise history over the past 100 years. That's just absolutely the truth. He's got the second most win in that time frame since Bobby Cox. He has been our leader through probably the second most successful stretch of success in Braves franchise history outside of what happened in the 90s and 2000s. He is a wonderful person, both in terms of being a baseball person and a person in general, beloved across the game. He deserves all the praise, all just anything positive that goes Brian Snitker's way. He deserves it. But there's also just the simple truth that the instances of you just watching the Braves and seeing decisions that are made, and I'm not saying that, I can only speak for myself. I'm not suggesting I know more about the game than Brian Snitker. As many have said, he's forgotten more than I'll ever know. But I do feel that it's pretty clear that there's more instances where you're left thinking, well, why did he do that? Where was the value added in that decision? Than thinking, wow, he really put us in a position to succeed there. The Braves need a new voice at the helm of the squad that's going to put them in a position to where they can succeed more. And that's why I think Brian Snitker's time has simply run its course. It happens with every manager, with every organization. Love Brian Snitker. He's been tremendous, but the time is right for this to occur, for the Braves to get a new voice at the head of the squad.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So if you're a college basketball fan, you'll know the name Buzz Williams, who is the Texas A&M coach. And he just left to become the coach at Maryland, I think is where he went. And he had a really interesting take on it. He said, after about 5-6 years, your voice just kind of gets stale and it's time to move on. And if you look at his track record throughout his career, he's always done that. Marquette, Texas A&M, after about 5 or 6 years, he leaves because he just feels like it can only end badly if you stay too long. And with Snit, it's never been just one thing. Like, it's not like one egregious thing that happened. It's not like anybody puts the 2025 season at the feet of Brian Snitker. No one blames him for what's happened this year. But it's just time for something new. It's just gotten a bit stale. And I think that I find that to be the case with not only the manager, but also in some ways the roster. Like, I think the roster needs a shakeup. I think the coaching staff needs a shakeup. I think the front office needs a shakeup, not a major one at the top. I'm not talking about Alex Anthopoulos, but I'm just talking about they need some new blood. They need some new life. They need some new ideas. It has just gotten stale. And that's no one's fault. That's, the old saying is familiarity breeds content. Like, just the more you're around the same group of people year in, year in, year in, year in, year out, it just gets stale. And I just think it's time. And Snitker's also been in, he's been around the organization for 50 years. I mean, I'm sure the guy would like to go spend some time with grandkids and, not have to worry about the nonsense that we talk about on a daily basis, and not have to worry about knuckleheads like us talking about the stuff that, he has to worry about on a daily basis. I'm sure he's got much better shit to do. So I do fully expect this to be the last month of Brian Snitker's, coaching career with the Braves or any team. I think he'll stay in the organization. He'll get some sort of, emeritus, lifelong position in the front office where he can come to spring training anytime he wants. Very much like Bobby, he can do, he's got a lifetime pass to be around the team as much as he wants. I just don't think he's going to be the manager. And that is going to kick off another fascinating part of this all season, is who is going to be the next manager of the Braves. And then what is their coaching staff behind them look like? Because those are massive questions as well. Just another massive, massive piece of what is going to be a massive, massive offseason for the Braves. You're muted, buddy.
Everybody has in their mind that, when it comes to, that window of opportunity, that window of competing, and the Braves have had an extended one. The Braves run of being a true contender, it's not over with in my mind by any means, but it's been going on for nearly a decade. We're coming up on, I know they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but it lasted for 7 years. That's an extended period of time for an organization. And while everybody kind of envisions going up a little bit, going up a little bit, going up a little bit each year till you have that 2 or 3 year window till you really are a World Series favorite, the Braves kind of peaked early in 2021, and ever since then, it's just kind of gone.
Yeah.
Progressively downhill. Trouble in the playoffs, trouble being able to stay healthy, offense falling off a cliff last year, and then this year, everything just kind of all fallen to rock bottom at times. When you have that occur over as long of a stretch as we've had it, which basically is 4 years now since we won the World Series, it's time. The staying with the current regime, it's run stale. Just having something new in and of itself can have value. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Braves do on that end. One other small but significant discussion that Alex Anthopoulos talked about was he talked about Raisel Iglesias and how good Raisel Iglesias has been in the second half of the year. Very much Iglesias has been to the level that he was all of last year in terms of how successful he's been on the mound. And Alex Anthopoulos was asked about the fact, well, do you have any regrets about not trading Iglesias at the trade deadline? And Alex basically repeated what he said at the trade deadline. We were not going to trade players just for salary relief. We were only going to trade players if we were able to get prospects to help us in the future. Now, I mentioned to Brad, Steven, when we were talking about the Ha-Seong Kim addition, we've now also added Jake Fraley, Kim, Alexis Diaz, players who formerly were successful major league players who could potentially be a part of next year's team. How the Braves have been active on the waiver wire has made me be less concerned about their inactiveness at the trade deadline. But I do think that it's very interesting when it comes to Alex Anthopoulos. He's not going to make a move for salary relief. That I don't want to read too much into, but at the very least, it lets me know that money may not necessarily be as big of a concern as many of us think that it is, number one. And number two, he values continuity in terms of players that he knows he can be successful here. He would rather them be here than them not. And I think that adds value in a positive way for this team that certainly seems to value continuity highly.
I imagine the people that are kicking themselves about not adding Iglesias are the other teams more than Anthopoulos is kicking himself about not dealing them. I mean, the offers you get are the offers you get. Like you have no control over what offers you get. Now, I will say, I think one reason the Braves didn't get the offers that they wanted to get was because the Braves were not willing to pay down the contracts. I have not been able to confirm that at any point, but I do believe that's the case where they just weren't willing. And I think that impacted the offers they got. And I think that's why anytime Alex has talked about those potential deals, he's always said the same thing, which is the only thing teams were offering were salary relief, which means he was asking them to take on the full salary. And I think that did impact both of those guys' market. But listen, if I'm a playoff team, I'm pretty pissed at myself, especially if I've had bullpen, disruption since the trade deadline. I knew it. I mean, Iglesias has just got such a long track record of success, and at the highest levels of this game, and in the ninth inning, in high leverage, and there's just not a lot of those guys out there available at any trade deadline. And the fact that no one was interested for $7 million or whatever he was. I think it was like $6 million actually for whatever he had left on his deal for the last 2 months of the season. It's still very surprising to me. And I mean, there's nothing you can do about it now. I hate that the Braves are spending this $6 million just letting Iglesias pitch on a bad team. I would have much rather them spent it by sending it to another team so that they would have sent us some prospects, but that's not the way they chose to go. So, it is what it is. There's nothing the Braves can do about it, but I guarantee you there are teams around the league that are looking back on the trade deadline, wishing they would have been a little more aggressive on Iglesias especially given the state of some of the bullpens around baseball at the moment.
And to be honest with you, I would love to have Iglesias back, but that's kind of another byproduct of all of this with how good he's had at the end of the season. I imagine that, he certainly could be looking, to have a closer spot somewhere. And if that's for us, that's great, but it's not off the table to where he certainly can get another multi-year deal where he's making double-digit salary each year, or excuse me, more than 10 million average annual value. I don't necessarily know where that works into the Braves plans. It would be cheaper, but let me put it this way. Raisel Iglesias, I would be more than happy to have him back, even in the closer role with how well he's ended the season. But that's kind of lower on the totem pole after all the other things that we talked about that add to what, again, is going to be a fascinating season or off season for the Braves. But there's still a little bit of this season left, and there still is some exciting moments to be able to watch, and perhaps the most exciting moment will take place tomorrow in Game 2 of the series against the Cubs. We'll discuss that in just a moment after another word from our partners.
We are longtime fans of Omaha Steaks, and I am drooling looking at the website right now, featuring USDA certified tender steaks, and also during their Red Hot Sale event going on right now this fall, 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus for the FT fam, an extra $35 off with promo code FOUL at checkout. You've been a big fan of Omaha Steaks since your early days as a pro.
Brings me back to my low A-ball days, because we used to survive on this. We get a big order at the beginning of the year, cook them on our little electric grill, can of peas, some mac and cheese. That was dinner for 4. We survived off Omaha Steaks. It still has a special place in my heart.
You thrived.
Well,
you guys ate like kings.
Yeah.
That's special. Get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Red Hot Sale event, and for an extra $35 off, promo code FOUL at checkout. 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with promo code FOUL at checkout. See site for details. Dig in.
So, Stephen, of course, we have talked about it nearly on a weekly basis, and it's for good reason, because it's actually become a bigger storyline than many of us had hoped, but it still remains one that could really work out well for the Braves. We talk about certainty added to the offseason, having an extra pick to work with, and adding to our slot total, our money total that we could use in what should be a very deep draft next year. That would be a great development. And all that, of course, rides on Drake Baldwin winning Rookie of the Year. And I bring that up because Drake Baldwin right now is actually second. Me and you have talked about it multiple times over the past month, where the odds are currently. Currently, Cade Horton of the Cubs is a slight favorite ahead of Drake Baldwin. And the thing is that tomorrow they'll be facing each other for the second time in a week. Cade Horton will be on the mound. He pitched last week against the Braves, through 5 excellent innings against Atlanta. He'll be on the mound tomorrow for the Cubs. Drake Baldwin, of course, now likely will be playing mostly every day when it comes to what he did. Another, great night tonight, or at least in his first at bat. A really awesome opportunity for Braves fans to witness tomorrow. And you're hoping that if Drake Baldwin can put another hot streak together, he'll be able to win the Rookie of the Year award and get that extra draft pick for the Braves.
Yep, Cade Horton versus Drake Baldwin Part 2. Obviously, the Braves just played the Cubs last week, and Cade Horton came out and he actually threw a no-hitter for the first 5 innings, got pulled at 75 pitches. That is notable that, you probably should keep that in mind, that he is on a pretty strict pitch count. The Cubs are not playing around with his pitch count at all. So, and I don't know if it'll be 75 pitches like it was last week, or if it'd be more or less, but if you're the Braves, you have to know, like, if you work this guy's count a little bit in the first 3 or 4 innings, you have a very good chance of getting him out of the game. And they're not going to let him throw 90, 100, 110 pitches. They've shown that. So, the Braves have been much better at taking walks. Let's have a patient approach tomorrow. Maybe try to get this kid out. He's very talented. Like you said, he is the front runner for Rookie of the Year right now. He's just pitched insanely well. And the Cubs are a better team than the Braves. And so the Cubs are playing in more high impact games than the Braves. And Drake's just got to be that much better when you're on a bad team. Is that fair? Probably not, but that's just the way it is. He's got to be that much better. And, I do think if the voting were today, just because of the Vegas odds doesn't mean it's written in stone. Like, if the voting were today, Drake Baldwin would still very much win. I think Cade Horton would win, but I could be wrong. He could be the leader in the clubhouse for all we know. We're not going to know until the voting, but days like tomorrow, that his teammates could really help him out by putting an eight spot on Cade Horton in the first 3 innings, and Drake going 3 for 3 with a couple of doubles. Anything like that will help his cause, because it is a neck and neck. I mean, even if you think Drake Baldwin is ahead right now, it is not by much. It is a tight race, and we've already laid out multiple times on the show why it matters for the Braves that Drake Baldwin wins this award. So tomorrow's a big kind of chapter of that story is Horton versus Baldwin part 2.
And the other thing I want to add to this discussion is that, yes, the draft pick coming with Drake Baldwin, we make it seem as if that's even more important than Drake Baldwin himself winning Rookie of the Year. And yeah, it's a lot. It means a lot to the organization. It would be a nice little consolation prize from what we've experienced this year. But to add to the reason why I think Drake Baldwin deserves it over Cade Horton, Drake Baldwin has been doing this all year as a catcher, playing not every day, but he's played in big moments and is delivered in big moments. And to me, the other thing that stands out about Drake Baldwin, he's in his rookie year. He's been consistent for the most part all season long. And his numbers, his underlying numbers, those metrics that we always talk about, they support what he's done. They show that what he's done is legitimate. He may even be underperforming a bit what he actually should be doing. So for those reasons, I feel Drake Baldwin is definitely in position to win and deserves to win the Rookie of the Year contest. It likely is going to take another hot streak, and hopefully that occurs starting tomorrow night against Horton directly. Also want to talk about tonight's game, Stephen, because it was a good victory. The Braves got a needed victory, much like Friday night. They faced a quality pitcher on the mound, a team that's in position to make the playoffs, and they look like they belonged. Ozzie Albies went deep with another left-handed hitter. Again, I know many are pointing out that how he's hitting against right-handed, or how he's hitting right-handed against left-handed pitching, that may be the most positive indicator of all. We're getting back to Ozzie being Ozzie. But I also want to put the spotlight on Bryce Elder, who gets some pretty legitimate competition, has been absolutely outstanding his past 4 starts. I don't think that means he gets a rotation spot next year. I don't think it means anything significant. But when we talk about as many Braves as possible, ending the year in as good a way as possible, Bryce Elder is certainly taking advantage of that. He was in command tonight, and he got the job done against a pretty legitimate opponent.
I'm not sure there is any pitcher in baseball with a higher range of outcomes than Bryce Elder. Quite literally anything could happen in a Bryce Elder start, and I would kind of believe it. I'd be like, yeah, that's, he could give up 9 runs before recording an out. He could throw a 1-hitter and anything in between. And I'd be like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. The dude there is not a soul on the planet that can figure out what Bryce Elder is or what he's going to do next, because we've seen him go on heaters. We've seen him go on, just fall off a mountain. And tonight he was really good. He's been really good, like 4 starts in a row, 3 or 4 starts in a row against really good teams. So I don't know what to make of it. I don't think the Braves know what to make of it. I don't think Bryce Elder knows what to make. I'm guessing he's as confused as the rest of us as to what happens on a night-to-night start for him. But he pitched well tonight, and the offense did enough. You still got Acuna batting 6, which we're not going to get the whole thing tonight. Still annoys me, but it is what it is at this point. Brian Snitker clearly thinks it's a way to get him out of his funk. Whatever. The offense did enough. Matt Olson hit another homer. Matt Olson is heating back up. He had a really slow August. He's heating back up. Ronnie did break his 0-for streak. He did have an RBI single tonight. Drake Baldwin had a double. Ozzie Albies hit another homer. So, it was a good start. We're going to talk about Spencer Strider here in a second to end the show. But, yeah, the offense did enough. We need the offense to be more consistent. It would be lovely to see Ronnie come all the way back before the season ends. But Bryce Elder, man, I don't know. I have no answers. I don't even know how to begin to give an answer about Bryce Elder. Just every single start, anything can happen. And in a lot of ways, that makes him the most interesting man on the team. Literally any outcome on any given night is attainable for him. And it's wild to watch, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's a year of riddles, right? Like we talk about, it's been one big question mark all year. And the Braves had just come out the last 3 weeks of the season and just wear a question mark on their hats. That's what they should do, because that's been one big question mark. But after all of today's action, Stephen, after all of today's news, all of today's action, and again, it's been a mixed bag of positive and negative, but at least it ended well on the field. The biggest question of all, and I think this may be of the season, the hell happened to Spencer Strider's mustache? Seriously. It's different. Listen, I'm here for change. I'm here for trying something new. But the man looked like he could whoop ass against anybody with that mustache. And I'm sure that he still can, but it's a different look. He looks 10 years younger. That stash was like one of the big, like the most identifying features in baseball. Strider's stash. When you saw that, it struck fear in hitters everywhere. I miss the stash.
I'll tell you this. That mustache, I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's because he's got a really, really dark hair. Maybe it's because it's like jet black, but it like changes his whole face.
It
like
was immaculate as hell.
If Spencer Strider committed a crime with a mustache and then shaved and was like on the run the rest of his life, he would never be caught, because that looks like two different human beings. Like, I thought that was like Pete Alonso's son. Like, he looks exactly like Pete Alonso. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, they showed him in the dugout. It's like he's playing out like the whole Major League Ricky Vaughn storyline, except it's with instead of a mustache, it's with the black glasses that Ricky Vaughn had. He took them off for the second one and he lost all his powers and he put them back on at the end. Maybe we'll see the mustache return next year. I don't know. It was weird as hell. I mean, he looked 12. He looked like a ball boy. I made the joke. He looked like Benny the Jet Rodriguez was about to teach him how to throw a baseball. It's crazy how much that mustache like changes his face. So yeah, I mean, he's kind of having one of those years where like, it's like a high school girl who breaks up with her boyfriend and cuts all her hair off. Like, he's having like that kind of, existential crisis kind of year where he's like, you know what? Screw it. Nothing else is going right this year. We're going with a new look. And there were, honest to God, people were as mad about that as anything that's happened all year long. People love that mustache. That mustache had its own Twitter. It had multiple Twitter accounts. It's got it's its own celebrity at this point. So it was a shocking turn of events.
I'm still in shock.
Yeah.
Like, you're killing me, Strider. You're killing me. Just don't make it forever. See what I did there?
I did. I picked up on all that.
I had to give it a little Sandlot, shout outs. Now listen, I'm don't ever think this will get back to Spencer Strider, but if anybody ever expresses to Spencer Strider our reactions to him being without his mustache, I want to make it clear. If he ever asks directly, it looks absolutely fantastic. Best decision he's ever made. I keep it that way if he prefers. All joking aside, we want to end the show on a bit of a hilarious note, because listen, we deserve a bit of hilarious in our lives right now as Braves fans, but it was a change. And it's one of those changes that you're just not prepared for, man. Even if I would have gotten a week's notice, I still would not have been prepared for it. But, hey, at the very least, let's put it this way. The end of the season for the Braves, I think, has been a bit more eventful than any of us had anticipated. Maybe not necessarily all in a positive way, but it, at the very least, has been eventful. Stephen, do you have anything else for us as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No, and I guess we should mention that obviously we talked about Cade Horton pitching for the Cubs tomorrow. Tomorrow, Spencer Strider pitches for the Braves. And then Chris Sale is on Wednesday, day off Thursday, and then the Astros come to town. So, you're going to get another Spencer Strider start tomorrow. Just another data point to watch. I'm curious to see, the outing he had against, I think Miami was decent. The next one, not quite as good. They pushed him back a couple of days. There was some speculation on whether he was hurt. I don't think he's hurt. So it's just going to be interesting to see what he looks like tomorrow. And that's going to be the big thing. And then we move, to Chris Sale, and then the Astros come to town for the weekend.
Yeah, and it looks like that what we could be seeing, what we could be lining up to see is over the next 3 games, We talked about it last week. The Braves are going to get the opportunity to really see where they stand. It didn't work out so well against Seattle, but see where some of these individual players stand. Again, more about the process over the results right now. See where some of these individual players stand. You've got Spencer Strider facing the Cubs for a second straight start, a playoff team. They saw him last start. What can he do adjustment-wise to maintain success, at least in terms of run prevention? You got Chris Sale on the mound tomorrow against the Cubs, and then Hurston Waldrop on the mound against the Astros on Friday. So plenty to watch for this week, of course, going along with Drake Baldwin, hopefully having a great week. Listen, can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Hammer Territory podcast. We're always here to cover the Braves, always here to deliver content, hopefully in a fun and informative way, sometimes in a not so fun way if a rant or two is involved, though a lot of times it's certainly warranted. For Stephen Tolbert, you can find him at B_outliers on Twitter/X. My name is Sean Coleman. You can find me at StatsSEC. Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Shout out to Brad Rowland. Shout out to Scott Coleman. Shout out to Grant McCauley, who was an awesome guest on Sunday. And shout out to the Braves. A hell of a day off the field and on the field. Hopefully, Shawn Murphy comes back better than ever. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.